Tana Rabbanon. We're at the second to the bottom line on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Tana Rabbanon. Shachat Shnei Kavasim Al Arba Chalois. Till now we were talking about. Extra kvasim. Now we're talking about you have two kvasim, but you had four chalas. So the question is, only two are going to be the lachme of the shtei alechem. So what happens? So the brisa moishech shtayim mehenem anifan. Two of them you make a tnufa on, and they will be the ones that will be the shtei alechem. The hashar. And the other two, nechalois bepidyon, they remain by the kabayis. Therefore, you can be paid to them, and then you can eat them. Now, Rashi tells us that this would fit in very good according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. Because according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, when do the lechamim become kadosh with kedusha gof? Only after this rika. So these two sets of breads, these four breads, they're basically all kedusha domim. So you can decide which two you want to designate as the shtei alechem, and the other two are regular mum and hektish bought with the moish and the lishka, so you could be paid to them. So Amru Rabban Chamed Reb Chisda. The Rabbanan told this brayso over to Reb Chisda, and they told Reb Chisda, "Hada like a Rebbe." This would not be consistent with Rebbe. It fits in very good according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, but not according to Rebbe. The Rebbe, kivan the Amar Shchita Mekacha. Rabbi holds the shchita is makadashit, which means two of these breads have kedusha saguf. So what are you going to do? You have these four breads. Two of them have kedusha saguf. Two of them don't. We don't know which ones have and which ones don't. But if we're pointed the ones that don't, so then you can eat the ones with kedusha saguf because they're nechalos l'kayanim, and the ones that you're pointed you can eat. But the question is, where are you going to do this pidyon? Where will the breads be during this pidyon process? The park luhehecha. The park lu me'avroi. If you're going to make the pidyon outside of the azara, the two breads that are kedushas aguf become possible b'yotzei. Kivan d'chsiv l'fnei Hashem, ifsil lehu b'yotzei. They become possible because any carbon that's kedushas aguf that leaves its designated zone, in this case the azara, it's possible. And igavoi, if they do this whole thing inside, well then hama'ayil chulun lazara. The moment they're paid the two breads, it's chulun, and now you have chulun lazara, which you're not allowed to have. Amalu Reb Chisda, that's not a problem. Lo olim karebi, it's going according to Rebbe. Upark lu gavoi, and they taka are paid it inside. You're asking me chulun lazara. It's not a problem of chulun lazara because the chulun memela kahavyon. And Rashi tells us, when is there a problem of chulun lazara? If there's chulun that's outside the azara and you bring it in, that's a problem. But if the chulun showed up in the azara by pidyon, you never brought chulun into the azara, there is no concern. Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina told Ravashi, V'atanya, we learned in our brayso, Kishu paidon ain't paidon ala b'chutz. You're telling me the pidyon is b'fnim and there's no problem with chulun lazara, but the brayso says b'ferish the pidyon is b'chutz. So then, according to Rebbe, you're going to have a problem with the psul of chutz. Zok Gemara, the psul of yotzei. Zok Gemara, havadai Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. You're right. This second brisa that we just quoted, kishu poidon and poidon ala b'chutz, that's going according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, who holds that they're all still only with kedushas tamim until there's rika. A Rebbe wouldn't be able to hold like that. According to Rebbe, the opinion would be done b'fnim. The Rebbe ha'ifsalahu b'yotzei. Amar le Rabacha b'rei de Rav Ravashi. Lema tavat yuftei Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say that the halachas that we just learned should be a tiyufta on Rabbi Yochanan, which Rabbi Yochanan, the Rabbi Yochanan that we're about to quote. The Itmar, we had a machlokes. Toida sheshachta al shemoinim chalois. We know the toida must be accompanied by 40 chalos. And 3 are matzah, 1 is chometz, and 1 of each of these sets is given to the kaihanim, and the other ones are eaten. There's a famous vart, I believe it's from, I think it's from Reb Schwab. It's very interesting why the Torah needs all these chalas. And interesting enough, the Torah is like a shlomim. Ashlamim Dizman Achila is Shnei Yamim V'Layla Echad. Yet a toida could only be eaten for one day and one night. And there's so much food over here. What's pshat? The Teretz is, why does someone bring a toida? Because he wants to give shvach v'odol Hashem Yisparach. We want to make a pirsum in Isa. So therefore we make sure that the carbon has within a lot of food, 40 breads, no one can eat that so fast. And a behema with very little time to eat. So what is he going to have to do? He's going to have to invite a lot of his friends to join him. So it'll be a beautiful Suda Saidah to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom. So the Rebbeinu designed the carbon that it will require a lot of guests. Chizkiya says, so what do you do if you shechted it for 80 chalas? Kitchu arba mitoch shmoinim. 40 of these are kodesh with kedushas aguf, are connected to the Torah, and 40 aren't. How you deal with it, I don't know yet. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, which is who we're going to focus on, loy kitchu arba mitoch shmoinim, nothing becomes kodesh. So that's fair, because we just learned that if you have 4 lechamim, 2 are kodesh and 2 aren't. Rabbi Yochanan holds whenever you have too many, nothing's kodesh. Zok to Gemara, v'lav mi itmer Allah. Didn't we have a clarification to the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Chizkiya? Amar Abzeira hakoil moedim. Rabbi Yochanan is moedim to Chizkiya. Heicha de Amar liktichu arboy mitoich shmoinim. If he said all shmoinim should be part of the carbon, yeah, then nothing works. But if you said 40 of these 80 are the ones that I want to be connected to the carbon taida, which would get a kedushas aguf, the kachi, everybody agrees it works. So hachanami, our brisa that talks about the kivsei atzeres that you brought with 4 lechems, maybe the case is liktishu tarti metoich arba. Not that you wanted all 4 breads to be part of the shter lechem. Rather, they said that 2 out of these 4 will get the kedushas aguf. So therefore, it stems with Rabbi Yochanan, and we have the machlokes according to Rabbi, you'll be paid to them inside, and according to Shimon, you'll pay to them outside. Tani Rab Chanina Tirasa kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Rab Chanina Tirasa quoted a brisa in front of Rabbi Yochanan. What about the opposite case? Shachat arba kvasim al beis chalas. So you shechted 4 kvasim, 2 of them are going to be the kivsei tzeres, the other ones are going to be apostle. Zok to Gemara, no. We have an eitzah how they can all be kosher. First take Moshech Shnai Mehen. First take 2. V'zoyrek Dom and Shaloi L'Shmon. Now normally it's usher to do an avodah Shaloi L'Shmon, but here it'll at least salvage all 4 karbonos that they can be brought. So the first 2 they'll spritz the dam achayt l'shem oila l'shem shlabim, and we know kol zvachem shezovchu Shaloi L'Shmon ksherim l'shem oila b'al l'shem chayba, which is not a problem. The first 2 will be a regular carbon oil, carbon shlomim, whatever you want. And the second 2 will become the kivsei atzeres. Shemiyat oimer kach, if you're not going to do it this way, hifsadet ha'sachreinim. So for instance, if you did them both lishma, 2 of them are going to be possible. Or if you first did the ones lishma and then shaloi lishma, the moment you did the first 2 lishma, the second 2 become possible. So first do 2 shaloi lishma, and then do 2 lishma. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, how could you allow such a thing? You're telling someone lechatchila to do an aveira and to make zrika shaloi lishma. V'chi aimrim loy la'adam amoid v'chetei b'shvil shetizaka. Are you going to tell me that to justify an end you could use a means that's usher? Means never justify an end. How could we tell somebody to do something lechatchila that is shaloi kalacha, that's making a zrika shaloi lishma? For Tanan we learned. Evorei chatos shenisarvu be'evorei oila. You have meat of a chatos that can mixed in with meat of an oila. Now the meat of the chatos is supposed to be eaten by the kahanim. The meat of the oila is supposed to go on the mizbeach. Now they're mixed. We don't know what to do. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yitnu l'mayla. Put everything l'mayla. Even the carbon chatos. You're not allowed to put meat on the mizbeach if it's not made like krava. V'royani es basar chatos l'mayla ki ilu hu eitzim. Well, we won't look at it like you're being mocked to the basar. You'll say it's merely fuel. Now you're being mafsed the chatos, but at least you're solving the oila. So here we're saying chatei du an aveira. Put the chatos l'mayla. Don't eat it. Why? To save the oila. To ubar tzurasan. The chacham say you cannot do that. Rather, let everything become nicer. The yetzu and then it'll be burned out nicer. So we're asking the kasha from the Rabbanon. The Chachamim, the Rav, we would pass like, says very clearly that you're not allowed to do an iser with the chatos to salvage zoila. So Zok Rabbi Yochanan, how can you allow them to make zrikas adam on the two extra kvasim, shaloi lishmon? Based on that, amai lema amoid v'chatei b'shvil tetiska. Zok the Gemara, it's not shver. Amoid v'chatei b'chatos b'shvil sheziksa b'chatos. If you're doing an avla with the chatos because it's going to save the chatos, then you could do it. So amoid v'chatei b'chatos b'shvil chatos amrinon, that you'll say. So therefore, here we're talking about the kivsei atzeres. Do two kivsei shaloi lishma to salvage what? The kivsei atzeres. But amoid v'chadei b'chatos b'shvil shetizka ba'oila lo yaminan. So the price is not fair. You know why the Chacham say tu b'tzurason? Because you can't compromise the chatos to salvage the oila, but you would be able to compromise the chatos to save another chatos, and therefore you could compromise the first two kivsei atzeres and make the zrika shelo shema to salvage the other ones.
What, you salvage
Themselves also, right? You're salvaging themselves also. But here the chatas is mamish going, yeah, that's right, very good. Chaim is pointing out, you're salvaging the kivsei atzeres gufa, not the other two, them two gufa, because they'll be kosher karbonos. Zok the Gemara ubechada mil samiyah minan. So you tell me that in the same carbon you would do say it. I'll bring your right not. But Tanya kivsei atzeres sheshachton shaloi lishman. That's what we're going to focus on. You shachton shaloi lishman. Oish shachton bein lefnei zman and erev shvus, bein lachas zman and after shvus. So the halacha is hadam yizarek. You still make the zrika, va'bosar yeyachel, and you can eat the basar. Now it won't be kivsei atzeres. It will be the shaloi lishman. It'll be whatever carbon that he had in mind for it. But vim hoisa Shabbos, if it's Shabbos lo yizrek, we don't let him spritz the blood because I'll do avera. Vim zorak, but if you did make this rika hortza, and if it's hortza, what's the purpose of that? It's a good carbon. So if it's a good carbon, you'll be able to be makter de murim or eat from the meat of the carbon. If it's a shlomim l'erev at night, you'll be able to eat it at night. You can't eat. To Tosfos says, why can't you eat the meat during the day? Raw. So he said eating raw is not the proper way to eat kosher. Zokt Gemara v'amai, based on your svara, lema amoid chatei b'shvil shetiska. Why don't you say do the zrika on Shabbos? Why do the zrika on Shabbos for what? For these kivsei atzeres, so we could salvage the kivsei atzeres. Here it's ba'isa carbon. So for sure it's isa carbon, but it's a different avera. Amoid chatei b'Shabbos kedei shetiska Shabbos aminon. If you're going to do an avera of Shabbos to save another part of Shabbos, yes, you would say that. But amoid chatei b'Shabbos kedei shetiska b'choil. What are we saying? Do an avera on Shabbos so that tonight after Shabbos you could be makter the carbon. That you can't say. Lo yabrina. Okay, so therefore it's not fair. Why by the kivsei atzeres? Why by the kivsei atzeres you would allow the shaloi lishma on the zrika, the first two, to allow the second two, and Rabbi Yochanan's kashrus and shver. Frek the Gemara ubetarti mili lo yamrinan. Now I'm going to go back on the other side. We said that you're not going to allow you to do an avera with the chatos to save the oila. Why not? I'll prove to you that you could. But now we had an interesting case. Chavish shenishbura begas el yoina. The Bach takes out the word shal truma, but it doesn't really matter because the case was a chavish shal truma. You have a chavish of truma, and the way the wine press was set up was there would be a gas el yoina, which was a big vat where they put the shmarim and the grapes, and there was a mash there with a whole bunch of wine, and it would drain down through a filter into a bar. So the gas el yoina is the big vat where the squash grapes are, and the bottom, the tachtoina is the barrel. Now in the barrel on the bottom there was tachtoina chulun tmein. There's chulun tmein. So here's our issue. There's truma in the top. It's tahar still. It's going to run down on its own into the chulun, and it's going to become tamei. And now it's messing up your chulun. Chulun Tamei is Nishkavelach, you can use it if you're Tamei. But if Truma falls into it and it becomes Tamei, now you can't use it at all. So you have two choices. You have choice number one, is you have a big bucket that will capture all of the Truma, but it's Tamei. So you're going to be being Matameh to Truma B'Yadayim, but at least you're saving your Chulun. The other option is you have a little bucket that's only a revius, and that will salvage, and that's tahar. So if you catch the wine in that, it'll be tahar, but then the rest of it is going to run down and destroy your chulun. So what is the halacha? Moide Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua. I'm sorry. If the chulun tummy is mixed with truma tameya, then it's useless.
So it's going to ruin the trimmer also. It only the trim is now good. It's only going to be ruined when it's got to go.
So you're asking what's between that and taking it in a bag and chapping it in a tomakeli? Is that what you're asking me?
The small kaili was tom.
Tar. But the groise kaili is tomei. So if I say with the groise kaili, then at least I'll save my chilin down there, because the trimmer won't fall into it.
But he said everything.
No, the truma becomes tomei. If the truma is tomei, because the kaili is tomei. The big kaili was tomei. The little kaili was tur. So I'm happy that you asked me. So this way, Brad asked Mark Lor. So Moeder Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shua Shem Yochel Hatzal Mimena Revius B'Tahira Yatzil, and don't use the big bucket that's tomei to catch all the wine to save the chulin. The imlav, but if you can't be matzil with a revius, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, you know what you do? Just let it ride. Tered v'titma, and don't use a big barrel that's tomei to catch the chulin, to catch the truma, v'al yitma'en b'yad, because then you're making it tomei b'yad. Better don't save the wine, even though it's going to become tomei anyway in a minute, but you're not allowed to touch it. You're not allowed to be tomei b'yadayim. So you're only allowed to save what you can save in a keli that's tor. Rabbi Yeshua, no, af yitma'en b'yad. You're allowed to be metamet b'yad, and therefore you'll save all the chulin. So you see here, it's two different things. To save the chulin, you're being metamet the truma b'yadayim, and your Yeshua allows it. So you see, even by two things, you are chait on one thing to save another thing. Zok Gemara shiny hosam de l'tuma kozla. This is not mamish doing a chait to save something else, because at the end of the day, in a minute, the wine that's tar, the trumatic wine that's tar, is going to run into the bar, and it's going to become tama in a minute. All you're doing is you're being metamet a little bit earlier, and you're doing it b'yadayim by capturing it in a barrel that's tame. That will allow. But mamish, doing a chet on one item to save a different item, like putting the basar chatas on the mizbeach to save the oil, that you wouldn't do. He also, Rabbi Yitzchak, when Rabbi Yitzchak came, Tani, he brought with him the following brisa. Kivshe atzeres seshachtan shaloikim mitzvasan. Rashi in his first pshat taichin shaloikim mitzvasan means shaloi l'shma. So you shechted the kivshe atzeres shaloi l'shma. The loch is psulin, and therefore utu uber tzirasan. The age of the base shreifa. So let's get clear what the halacha of shaloi l'shma is. The first Mishnah in Zvachim tells us that all karbonos that you shech shaloi l'shma are kosher. Ela shaloi alu l'bayim shem choiva. The only two exceptions are chatos and pesach. So kivshe atzeres, if it's shaloi l'shma, why is it psulin? We're going to have to see in a minute. But that's the brisa that Rabbi Yitzchak quotes, that it's possible. Amar Rab Nachman, mar de makish lehu lechatos tani psulin. You know why Rabbi Yitzchak quotes a brisa that's psulin? Because in the parasha that describes the kivsei atzeres, the pasuk says, right? It says vasisim sir izem echod lechatos, and right after that ushnei kavosim b'nei shana lezevach shlamim. So there's a hekish from the chatos to the shlamim to tell you, just like a chatos is posel shaloi l'shma, so too the kivsei atzeres are posel shaloi l'shma. That's why kivsei atzeres are posel shaloi l'shma. But Tana Devei Levi, the Gomer Shal Mechayva Mishalmen Yadava, they will show you elsewhere, hold that whenever you have Shal Mechayva, you could learn them out from Shalmen Yadava, which are going to be kosher shaloi l'shman, ela shaloi olu b'ayim shem chayva. Tani Ksherim, they would learn that by the Kivzat Tzer, Sheshacht and Shalai Shman, it will be kosher. Where is this Tani Levi? The Tani Levi, Vishar Shalmei Nazir, Sheshacht and Shalai Mitzvasan. Now the Shlomim of a Nazir actually also is mentioned in the pasuk right after Chatas, and they said that Shalmei Nazir, if he shechted Shalai Shman, Ksherin, they'll be kosher. Of course, the Nazir would have to bring another carbon, but this carbon is still kosher. Because this shlomim is compared to a toida, and therefore the zman achil is only yoyim v'layla. The ein ta'unin loy lechem v'loy zraya. You don't have a zraya b'sheli. You don't have lechem because those are the karbonos. Those happen to the karbonos that are discharging the naziris. In this case, once it was shechted shaloi l'shma, it's no longer impacting the naziris, so it doesn't need this whole process. So you see that Tana Devei Levi learns Shalmei Chayva from Shalmei Nedava. Meishvei Frek the Gemara. There's two categories of Hashamais. Some require a ben shana, and the animal should be a maximum of a year. So Osum ben shana, but you brought the wrong animal. Vehevi ben shtayim. Which Hashamais need a ben shana? Rashi says, Kegoyin the Nazir Tamei u'Mitzayra. A Nazir Tamei and a Mitzayra that bring a Nasham, bring a Keves, which is 1 year old. If you brought 2 years old, or the opposite, Ben Shtayim, a Asham that you're supposed to bring, an animal that's an Ayal that's 2 years old, which Rashi tells us, Asham Gezelois and Asham Me'ilois. What if you brought a Ben Shana? So you have two different Ashamais for which you brought the wrong carbon. Psulim, their apostle, uto ubar tsurasan, and therefore you wait till it become nicer. The yetzel avesas reifa. That's the asham. Aval oilos nazir v'oilos sheiladis v'oilos mitzayra shahayu b'nei shtei shanim, even though they were supposed to be ben shana v'shachtoni shechted them ksherim. What's the difference? Klala shal davar. Kol kasher b'oilos nadava, kasher b'oilos chayva. We do learn oilos nadava. We do learn oilos chayva from oilos nadava, but the asham we learn from achatos. V'chol apostle b'chatos, apostle b'asham. Chutz mishaloi l'shmoi, because shaloi l'shmoi, there's a machlokes in the first mission of Zvachim. If an asham shaloi l'shma is apostle, and this brayso clearly holds that an asham shaloi l'shma is kosher. But you see clearly over here, by these Hashamayis, it also mentions Chatos in the same pasuk. Yet, our brayso here says that you don't learn it out of Chatos. What do you learn it out of? You learn it out of Oilas Nedava. So Zok Gemara, that's not fair. Hi Tana, Tana Devei Levi. The Tana of this brayso is the Tana Devei Levi. Toshma, let's ask another kasha. The Tani Levi taught us, Asham Nazir, Vasham Mitzayra, Sheshachtan Shaloi Lishman. You shechted on Asham Nazir and then Asham Nazir Shaloi Lishman, Ksherim, V'le Alu L'Bailam L'Shum Chayva. But what if it was shachtan Mechus's man b'Bailam, meaning the Bailam didn't finish their Sidrei Tahira, so they're not yet ready to bring this carbon? Or they brought an animal that was the wrong animal. V'shachtan, it'll be psulim. Freit to Gemara, V'im Isa, if you learn like the Tana Devei Levi, why do you learn Asham and say that it's possible if you brought the wrong animal? There are some Ashamim that need two, been 2 years, and there are some that have been 1 year. V'im Isa ligmar mishlomim. Learn not a shlomim that it should be kosher, because shlomim is good either way. Zok to Gemara, shlomim mishlomim gomar, Asham mishlomim loy gomar. Yeah, you could learn Shalmei Chayva from Shalmei Nedava, but you can't learn an Asham from a Shlomim. Freit the Gemara, okay. V'gomer Shlomim Shlomim, Ligmar Nami Asham Asham. Why don't you learn one Asham from another Asham? In other words, you have some Ashamis that says 2 years, some that say 1 year. Say the one that says 2 years, who it in 1 year, because you learn it from the other Asham. And the one that says 1 year, who it in 2 years, because you learn it from the other Asham. Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzayra, Asham Gzelos, Asham Me'ilos. That 2 years should be enough. Asham Gzelos, Asham Me'ilos, Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzayra, that 1 year should be enough. Amar B'Sima Barashi, it's not a kasha. Why is it not a kasha? Because the whole vart is I'm learning Shalomim of Chayva that was done Shaloi L'Shma has the same halacha as the Shalomim of the Dava that was done Shaloi L'Shma. Just like over there, Shaloi Lishma is kosher, so too over here, Shaloi Lishma is kosher. But you want to say that an Oshim that the Torah says needs to be 1 year, it should also be kosher with 2 years, because a different Oshim the Torah said 2 years? That's the way it's supposed to be done. We need to prove that even though it's done wrong, it's still going to be mutter. That you'll never see. Like a shlamim that was done shaloi l'shma, or an oil that was done shaloi l'shma. But they done in davar shaloi b'achsherei midavar shabech sherei. So therefore, you can't learn from an osham that needs a 2-year-old animal that hu adin, the osham that the Torah specifies as a 1-year-old animal, will be able to be kosher with a 2-year-old animal. You don't learn from something that's kosher. I'm going to quote you a Gemara that we had multiple times throughout Zvachim and Menachos, and that is, we know that there's halachas that if a carbon becomes puzzle, and by mistake it was placed on the mizbeach, there are some carbonas that you need to take off the mizbeach, and there's some carbonas that you could leave on the mizbeach. One of the psulim that you could leave on the mizbeach, if it was put on by mistake, is Yosy. That means after the zrika, a piece of meat that belonged on the mizbeach was taken out of the azara. It's possible. You're not allowed to put it on the mizbeach. But if you put it on the mizbeach, you could leave it there. So the Brisa asks, Minayin lo yoytze, shem Allah lo yered. Vos epis, yoytze is the type of psul, shem Allah lo yered. The teretz is because you find a similar case where it's not even a problem. Shara yoytze kosher b'bama. By bama, there was never a psul of yoytze because there was never any gvul. There was never a perimeter. So you're bringing a raya from something that's kosher lechatchila to something that's not kosher lechatchila. So you see, you can bring such a raya. Zok Gemara, as we had many times, Tana azois Torah sa'ila riba samachlei. Really, we learned it from a riba in the pasuk. The svara is not really the svara. That's not really the real reason why we say that yoytze im olu lo yerdu. It's really the miyat of the pasuk that teaches us that, and therefore you don't have a raya. Baruch Hashem, we were zoichet to finish Memches, and tomorrow by Hashem we will learn Memtes. Over the next couple of days, I'm going to try very hard to get ahead a little bit, because Purim is a very hard day to learn. So I'm hoping that by the time we're finished Tanyas Esther, we would have finished Purim's daf, and then we'll just pick up on Shushan Purim, and by Yeshivas Mordechai Tzadik, we'll learn other lemudim. Get to Vach.
Shkoyach, I get the ball.
So I just want to share something that I heard from Rabbi Breidowitz today. I was struggling, and I mentioned it when we learned the Gemara. I couldn't understand. We had a story a couple of days ago with this Talmud in the yeshiva who reserved a zoina for an obscene amount of money, and then when he went there, his sister saved him, and then she came to the yeshiva and she became a giyaris, and he married her. So I couldn't get my head around it. Why would he marry her? Okay, at the end of the day, she was still a zoina. Did his mother approve of that shidduch? He could have all the cheshbonis in the world. She did tshuva, but at the end of the day, what's past Adam and shidduch? A and B is, everyone knows the famous story. She should have said, "I'm not going to marry you. You were prepared to be with a zoina. I'm not marrying you. I'm too fruit for you." Right? So how did this happen? I had the same problem with Rochav. It didn't make sense to me. Yeshua, the Godla Dor, the Manik B'Yisrael, he couldn't find anyone better to marry than Rochav Azoina. How are you talking? Okay, maybe she was a good baker, because that's the other pshat than what she was. So I asked Rabbi Breidowitz. So he told me very beautifully. He told me, this is a mice of Yehuda and Tamar. They realized that it wasn't typical of them to be in such a matziv, but the Rebbeinu Shalom pushed them in such a matziv, and they understood that this was a siman shamayim, that this was a b'sher shidduch. So Avada, it doesn't seem right, but they understood that since such a maisa, it was such a not normal thing for that to have occurred, they started the siman shamayim. That was the b'sher. If that's the b'sher, it doesn't matter if it's plastic, it doesn't pass. It's the b'sher. And Rabbi Breidowitz shared with me a beautiful story with the Yismach Moshe. The Yismach Moshe was the Reuven eel, right? So there was a bucher who had to travel across Europe or Hungary in a train, and someone told him, if you're going to be on the train passing through eel, you have to stop in eel, and you have to go meet the Yismach Moshe. So he got off an eel, and he checked into a bed and breakfast. That's how it was in those days. They didn't have big hotels. People had extra rooms in their house, and then they would rent them out. So he came and he stayed there overnight. In the morning, he had to go buy breakfast. So he went to the market, and there was a booth where there was a girl selling melons. She was selling melons, so he asked her, how much is a melon? I'm sorry? Was? What about the Dejiruv? Dejiruv? So this is the Dejiruv himself who's there in the thing. So he went and he asked how much is it, and she gave him a price. He said too much, and he walks away. So she quoted a beautiful medrash that's mentioned when Yaakov came to the Makkah Mikdash. Rebbe Shalom made the sun set because Rebbe Shalom said, "Chacham zeh yavei leveis l'maloni." What's the lashon? Tzaddik zeh bul leveis maloni v'yifte b'loy lina. So it was such a sharp chap, malon melon. I guess in Hungarian, maybe the words melon too. He was so nespool that this girl was able to quote a chazal and stel it to melon. He was blown away that he lifted up his eyes and he looked at her. He was beside himself that he was nichshel in such an affair to look at a girl. He was oishmensch, and he went back to his hotel and he was crying and crying. And the balbus asked him, "What's is?" And he says, "I was nichshel and the gefer lechaver gekickt auf a Frau in chenes the shos halten." So the Balachsani said, "I have a pusha da'itza. I know this girl. She's a very fine girl, and she comes from a very fine mishpucha. Lama machen shidduch. And then if you marry her, there's a mitzvah, because there's a mitzvah to look at the woman you marry before else to Zargafon, he liked this Eitzah, but the Yid said, maybe we should first go hear about the Yismach Moshe, let's ask the Yismach Moshe what to do. So they went to the Yismach Moshe, and the Yismach Moshe said, "Dus agit a shidduch, mazal es machen, novus, mekenish tina shidduch unelterin, send your parents a telegram, they should come to hear to Il, and we should make the shidduch." So they come, and the mother says, "Ich will rein the kala," and she goes to the kala, and she sees the kala, and she said, "There is no way she's marrying my son, because she is chenek. She's a chenek. You know what a chenek is? A misakala. This model is a chenek. She's a misakala. My son is a good-looking guy. There's no way I'm letting the shidduch." So what does the Yismach Moshe do? Only the Yismach Moshe can do things like this. And he said, if you let your son marry this girl, ich zugach zi, that all of their children are going to be beautiful, from the shenste looking kids. And Kachava, he married her, and he had 10 children, and they're all the most good-looking children around. And this is going to the Masa. So you see, the Eibish is Mitzarav Tzarifim, Mizavik Zavigim, like the Masa with the Rishash as well, to bring a shidduch together. So these Gedolei Olam chap that this is Simon Hashemayim, this is the Basharta. You never heard of Chenek?
There's that the neshama of Shem, Dina, wants to get to.
Right.
Dina was what they did. So they tried again with Zimri and with his cousin. And again, then we go to the Gemara, the general's wife. We tried to seduce the Akiva.
Right.
Remember? And he laughed. And
He laughed and he cried.
And then he eventually married her.
That's right.
That was really Mishnah.
Aha. Wow, gewaltig. Okay, I get the Woche, boy, say. I get the Woche. A Freitag in Piram and a Simcha in Piram.